thank your partner. Say thanks for sharing. We're also set up now here on the stage. On the stage, we have a man who really has his hands on some really big projects. On the stage, we're about to have a man who is the senior program manager at Microsoft with a specialty in user experience design. He has previously been working for Amazon, also as a senior program manager, and also working with Uber, and he's done some different projects with some leading transportation and mobility companies, world-class airline, and a Formula One racing team. So a really wide spectrum of working with some massive brands, and he's here to teach us mostly three things. Paper prototyping, how to do that, solution validation, is our solution a good one, and also provide some good design hacks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on our stage the EIA mentor and speaker for years and years. On the stage we have Zaid Ha, please.
All right, thank you so much for the warm introduction. It's always good to be back. When you said years and years, it's been year and years, so it's been 2 years. Yeah, awesome to be here. So today I'll be talking about prototyping, validation, and
Is it turned on?
yeah, it was working just a second ago. Do I have to stand over here? And design hacks. Let me move the laptop this way. Yeah, there we go. It should be better. Cool. So, hi, I'm Zaid. Got a good. Thank you so much for the introduction. Basically, I've kind of been all over the place. Worked at many different companies. Did my own startups as well, and that's kind of informed who I am today, and probably like what I've learned and what I kind of hope to teach you all in the next sort of 60 minutes or so. The other thing is I have 60 minutes, I have 68 slides, so I'm going to go over this really, really quick. So just bear with me. I think I have to.
It's the metal frame here.
Yeah. Just kind of. Let's try to maybe do this. All right. I'm just gonna stand kind of over here. Let's hope this works out. All right. So UX is user experience. Before we kind of dive into the prototyping, we want to talk about like why exactly we're doing this. So first of all, you know, when you talk about user experience, you're really talking about building an experience for your customer, for the people who you're designing your product for, right? It's less about just creating like, you know, the most beautiful, you know, app or product that is, you know, functionally really well made or well built. It's really about building that experience that allows your final customer to have a good time, honestly. So I'm not having a good time with this clicker. Okay, so in order to get into that, the first thing we kind of want to talk about is what I call product parameters, right? So you've probably heard of these in some shape or form, different from what I'm talking about right now, but it's all pretty much the same thing. When you're building your product, you have three main places that you can give input to your product. You can provide input on the function, you know, that's the performance, the features, how your product is built. You know, you can provide input on the form, the aesthetics, the beauty of the product, how it looks really. And then the last bit is the cost. And the cost is not only a monetary cost, it's also the effort it requires to build your product. So it could be, you know, a 3-week thing like, you know, at European Innovation Academy, it could be a 3-year or even 3-decade-long cost of your time. Right, so it's really understanding these three things and how they come together to give you kind of the biggest impact. Now, everybody has a very different opinion of how these three things should be prioritized. maybe, yeah, let's try that. Let's put it over here. All right. So everyone, like I said, everyone has different views about what's important. Sometimes you have these corporate managers who say like, hey, forget about how, forget about the features, the performance of the product. I just want something that looks good and doesn't cost me a lot of money, right? And then you have your software engineers. A lot of times software engineers say like, hey, I want to build something that is, functions really, really well. We don't have any latency, we don't have any of those type of feature-related problems, but I don't care how it looks. And then, but I also don't want to spend too much effort in building this thing, right? And then you have, designers, and I'm speaking as a designer myself, but these are probably people who are closer to artists, who really value the idea of building something that looks beautiful and has those like nice colors, those like rounded corners and the gradients and stuff, and those like buttery smooth animations. But these people are again like closer to artists. What you want to be, what a good designer wants to be, and what honestly everyone wants to be is they want to be able to balance all these three out, and that's going to be really important for all of you, especially when you're here, when you have 3 weeks to kind of build your best product. All of those three things are just as important. But given the kind of short time frame that you have, in a startup environment, it's really important to kind of think about your priorities, right? So you don't have much money. I was a student once as well. I had a negative bank balance in my account for like the longest time. So I understand how it is. You need something that's cheap to build, doesn't cost you a lot of money, and is quick to build as well, so that you can start showing it to people. You obviously need it to solve problems, right? You don't want to build something and waste your time building something that doesn't do anything useful. And last, but almost just as important, is you want it to look good so that people actually want to use this, right? So those are those three priorities, kind of listed down here. So there's cost, there's function, and then there's form, right? But all these three, again, like they play an important role. They kind of like come in together as well. So. Here's a really nice quote that kind of sticks with me. This is by F.A. Porsche. He says, if you analyze the function of an object, its form often becomes obvious. Just by understanding what a product is supposed to do, you understand how it needs to look, right? And Porsches are a really good example of this. They're fast cars, they need to be aerodynamic, and so they have this like, this shape which looking at it from distance you can tell it's a Porsche if you're into cars. So the last thing when we're talking about user experience and the purpose of the design mentors that are here is to understand what UX is and what UI is. So UI is user interface, whereas UX is user experience. So all the design mentors here are here to kind of help you on user experience, which covers a lot of different things. Everything from like research to interviewing to usability, prototyping, interface layout, copywriting, presenting and speaking, brainstorm, working tightly with programmers. It's all of those things that the designers here are well versed in. So really reach out to your design mentors to make sure you're making the best use out of them. The two things that incorporate user interface is just the interface design and visual design. And these are just also pretty important, but keep in mind these are all the different things that you can ask your design mentors about. So make the best use of them possible. Okay, prototyping. So prototyping is the art of quick building for testing purposes. The whole idea is you want to fake it till you make it. You only have 3 weeks here. You want to make the most out of it, and I'll show you why you need to do that. So first of all, why do you need to prototype? you probably already know a bit about what a prototype is. Really simply put, a prototype is a version of your product that you build before you actually do any lines of coding, or maybe even before you touch a computer. And the idea for that is to really test your product itself. So I'm going to skip over this video right now. Yeah, so when you're talking about prototyping, you're really building towards what's called a narrative complete product. So you've probably heard of the term minimum viable product, or MVP, as part of this program, but as part as many other everywhere in the startup ecosystem, you've heard of the word MVP. What I like to talk about is narrative complete product, NCP. So and the reason I talk about this is because sometimes it's hard to really justify what you think is minimum, what your investor thinks is minimum, what you think is viable versus what somebody else thinks is viable. It's too subjective, and it really varies from person to person. But what everyone can agree on is a narrative complete product. A narrative is, exactly the kind of user story that you have for your customer. So based on what exactly you're trying to build for them, you build this narrative of hey, this is my user, this is what they want to do, and then you go out to solve that problem, right? So here's a good way of thinking about a narrative complete product. So let's say you want to build a car, okay? What is the main purpose of a car? It's to take you from one point to another, right? It's to take you from point A to point B, right? And so that is your narrative in the case of a car. Right, so when you're thinking of how do I build my prototype, or how do I, start working on my product, there are two ways to do it. One way is, kind of a component-wise thing where you start off by building a wheel, and then you build another wheel, and then you build, your chassis or the base of the car, and then you build a bit more, and then you finally build the final product, right? And so in that case, throughout the entire process, your customer doesn't really get to see what you're doing. And that's what happens usually if you start, straight by, starting with the coding, right? So what you want to do is something more like this. You want to get from point A to point B. Hey, let me give you a skateboard. Okay, let me give you a skateboard and see what you think, right? So your customer's not going to be happy about a skateboard, right? They'll be like, hey, I wanted a car and you gave me a skateboard. But it'll help them get from point A to point B, right? And what you can do from that is you can learn what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and then build on that. So you give them a skateboard, they're like, hey, I need to steer somehow. Okay, so then you give them a little steering thing, or a scooter, right? And then they're like, well, I want to sit down somewhere, and so you give them a bike, right? And then they're like, oh, I'm getting kind of tired, so you give them a motorbike. And what you notice is as you go through this, you learn what they dislike about your current product, and what they like about it as well. So what this person could say they like is hey, the one thing I like about my motorbike is I like that open air feeling of, just sitting there and, getting the wind in my hair and things like that. So in the end, you give them a convertible instead of giving them, a car like this. And so you can basically use what you learn from your customer to build a better product than you imagined yourself before. So you went from potentially building a car to building something that your customer really, really liked. It took an extra step, maybe an extra couple of steps, a bit more effort, but it's really worth it in the end because you can use that feedback to build a better product. And what really is the difference between those two? It's the idea of traction. And traction basically means that as you're working towards your product, you're getting more and more benefit out of building it. So when you build a wheel, there's no benefit to that wheel unless you have the rest of the car. But if you build a skateboard, you can take that out to customers, you can show them what you have, and you can learn from them, right? And so that's the idea of traction, that's what investors want to see. Once you show them that traction, then you can kind of, you can go to an investor and be like, hey, look, there are already 100 people using this prototype of my product, and this is what they've come back with in terms of feedback, and this is how I'm going to use that to, kind of improve my product. right? So now that you understand what exactly we're trying to do, let's talk a bit about prototyping. So you have this idea of fidelity in prototyping. You have low fidelity prototyping and you have high fidelity prototyping. Prototype fidelity is really the idea of how much detail, how much effort you put into building that prototype, right? So if you have something that's low fidelity, it means it was less effort, it was cheaper to build, quicker to build. High fidelity usually means like, you know, much more detail. You can imagine like, you know, those digital prototypes with a lot of color and, you know, those beautiful gradients, and kind of probably the last thing you want to do right before getting down to coding. So you want to start off with low fidelity always, right? And the reason to do that is, remember how we talked about prioritizing. You want to start with thinking about the cost of your product, and then you want to move on to you know, the function of the product, and lastly you want to talk about form, right? So that's why you start off with low fidelity. And the other reason to do this is because when you actually show this to customers, a low fidelity prototype is usually just lines and boxes and things like that, and you'll see a couple of examples later on. But when you show this to customers, rather than talking about, you know, like, oh, I don't like this color, they can actually talk about what's important at the beginning, which is the function, or, you know, the actual features that you're developing and why you're building those features. Okay, so what you want to do is, throughout this process of not only prototyping, but throughout this process of the entire product that you want to build, you want to follow this logical progression. You start off with an idea. You already, by now you have this idea, you validated your idea, and now you want to understand, like, okay, what's the next step? How do I actually start building something? So the next step after your idea is to start storyboarding, and this is part of what you're going to be doing today. Then after that, you get to prototyping. You start with a paper prototype, you end up with a digital prototype through that, and then you have your finished product. And why do you take this approach? Remember how I talked about that feedback you get from your customers? When you get a bit of feedback, you'll go down one step, and you know, let's say you get feedback from your customers saying like, hey, you know, I don't like the way you're doing X, Y, Z. You can go back down one step and, you know, redo that little bit. So you see over here, you have like the total effort that it's taken to, you know, to get to where you are. You'll probably have to go down one step, okay, repeat like one little bit. So zooming in, this is like the amount of added effort that you have to make. If you go to a paper prototype and you get some feedback, you'll add a bit of effort. Now, what happens when you skip all those steps? You go to your finished product, okay, and then, you know, you get some feedback saying like, hey, this isn't what I expected it to be. You have to go all the way to the beginning, back to your initial idea, and start from scratch again. And that's essentially why we do this whole thing, right? It's, you know, we all make mistakes. It's literally a part of our life, right? It's part of being human. And so the idea is, through this process, you'll actually stopping yourself from making too many mistakes, or learning from those mistakes quickly before they end up costing you too much time or too much effort. You know, you would kind of expect this to be a linear line, you know, kind of like straight, like, hey, this is where I am, this is where I want to go, and this is how I get there. But usually in every single startup, you end up going, you know, from where you are to where you want to be in completely different ways. So you'll probably learn that as you're passing through this program, that, you know, you have your idea, you get somewhere, and you're like, oh, you know, like, maybe I need to go back a step, maybe I need to rethink this, maybe I need to pivot completely. And so the process you end up taking to get to your final point is always going to be kind of a bumpy road, but it's definitely worth it in the end. When you skip all the steps, have you guys watched Silicon Valley? Is it popular here? There's a couple of people. You might remember this episode. There's no sound. Okay. Yeah. No, it's okay. We'll actually skip this because we're kind of a bit short on time. That's all right. Yeah, so essentially what they show in that video is there's this guy. He's the owner of he's the CEO of this large company called Huli, which is kind of like Google, right? And so this CEO is working on this product, and he essentially says like, hey, we have this competitor, we are better than them, because the competitor for them is a startup, and so they're like, oh, we're a big company called Huli, we're much better than this competitor, so whatever, just like give me a finished product, give me the final product. And they take that final product and they give it to customers, and the customers are like, oh, this thing doesn't work, it has so many problems, this and that, it doesn't do what I want it to do. And so basically, because he skipped all the steps, at the very end, they wasted 6 months, maybe a year worth of engineering time, just because they didn't want to go through the process of like prototyping or like learning what their customers actually want. Yeah, so let's talk a bit about what you'll be doing today. So you'll start off with what's called Crazy Eights, and here's a simple concept. We'll have a piece of paper, and we'll all do this together actually, later on today. So you have this piece of paper, okay? You fold it in half, okay? And then you fold it in half. And then one more time you fold it in half, right? When you open it up, you'll have essentially 8 different little boxes, okay? Don't do this right now, I'm just kind of showing you what to do later on. So you have these 8 little boxes, and in each box, you'll basically, you already have an idea of what you all want to do. You'll each individually do this, and in each box, you'll draw out, like one thought of your idea, right? So maybe it's a screen, maybe it's like, the way an animation works, or whatever it is. You'll draw that out, and then you'll draw another one out, and then another one, and another one, all the way until you fill this piece of paper. You only have 5 minutes to do it. And so basically what that means is you only have 40 seconds to finish each box. We'll all do this together at 2 p.m. And you'll find it to be a really interesting activity because after actually doing this, all of you can start to discuss your different ideas or your different ways of thinking about this final this product that you're all working together to build. So imagine there are 5 of you in a team. Each of you fill out this. By the end of it, you have 5 times 8, which is 40 different little bits of ideas that come together to build your final product. It's a really, really quick way to get a lot of ideas out on paper. And it's also a good way to get everyone in the team some time to talk about what they think they should be building, right? So a lot of times there's a bit of, some people are a bit quiet, some people are a bit louder. So this kind of activity allows all of you to have the same amount of time to kind of talk about your idea with each other. So we'll do this together at 2 p.m. down at the hall. It's going to be an interesting exercise. We've never done this together as like collectively as all of EIA. So it's going to be an interesting experience. So once you're down there at 2 p.m., when all the mentors come down, we'll all work on this together. The next thing you're going to be doing after that is storyboarding. So storyboarding helps us to better understand your narrative. So if you had to write a TV show episode about your app, what would happen in it? How is your product found? What is your narrative? How does your app solve the problem that your people are having? And what is their final reaction? So this is again another deliverable that you have, and it's supposed to be again a really quick deliverable. This is not meant to be a work of art. It's meant to be a work that shows us what exactly you're thinking, and it shows all of your team what exactly you're thinking. So again, think about like as you're going through today, think about like, oh, if I had to write a TV show, what's going to happen in that TV show, right? So like, how does my customer find the product? What are they doing right now? Like, what are they doing that doesn't work right now? And how am I going to improve that, right? Again, this is not a work of art. This is going to be a really simple exercise. It should take you probably an hour or so. The less amount of time, the better, so that you can focus on building your paper prototypes. So here's some really quick, simple ways to draw people to kind of help you think about, like, you know, how you're going to build a storyboard. It does not require an artist, it does not require a designer, anyone should be able to do this. So what I'd probably like for you all to do right now is actually take a picture of the slide. Take a picture of the slide just so that you all have an idea of what to do when it comes time. This is kind of cool. I'm going to take a picture of this. Picture of all of you. Looks like you're taking a picture of me. Oh man, feel so special right now. Cool. All right. Paper prototyping. So what exactly is paper prototyping? Now you kind of know what to do before you start prototyping to kind of get those ideas out. Paper prototyping is actually probably, you know, the simplest part of this of today's talk. So the idea of paper prototyping is you draw out your product on a piece of paper, right? So let's say you're building a mobile app. You draw out a really simple, you know, like screen, and then on top of that screen, you know, you add some like little post-its or little cutouts of paper that acts as buttons, as text boxes, as whatever you like. And so they can be, you know, as simple as this, or, you know, maybe something a bit more complex or a bit more intricate, right? So something like this, where you actually draw out on a piece of cardboard your mobile phone, or you draw out like a laptop or something, and then on that, you know, you have you put these pieces of paper that allow, you know, your customer to feel like they're holding a cell phone and you know, using your product without actually doing any line of code, without even touching a computer sometimes. In this case, this person, you know, did some stuff on a computer, but you should probably start by just, you know, using a marker and a paper, or a pen and a paper, whatever you like. So, so yeah, your user touches like a fake button, right? So like they touch something, and then once they touch something, you change the screen, right? So what happens when you touch this button? Let me put another screen in front of you so that you can kind of go through the process, right? And so you could start this by saying like, hey, you know, let's say I'm building a food ordering app. Okay, so in food ordering app, what you need to do, like the narrative is, I want to find a good place to eat, and I want to order that food, and I want it delivered to me, right? So in this simple process, all you would do is you would design those screens on a piece of paper to be like, hey, you know, here's what the first screen looks like. This is where you see all the food. You know, you click on this, and then you click on that, and you click on that, and that's how you get your food delivered, right? So you'd have like 3-4 different screens, and you would show that flow from one screen to the next. That's essentially, you know, the idea. We have this thing called UI Stencil. So I don't know if you've seen these before or not. I wish I brought one to kind of show to you all, but essentially they allow you to build these prototypes, you know, much more quickly. So assuming all of you are, you know, budding entrepreneurs, you know, you're this is the start of your journey, you know, you should probably think about like buying one of these in the future. You know, in America you can buy like a set of these for like $10, and you know, you can find them on Amazon. You can kind of find them maybe at an art store as well. They're really helpful to kind of get those ideas out on paper quickly, because a lot of times what stops you is thinking like, oh, how should I draw this icon, or you know, like, ooh, how big should my paper be, or whatever. So in this case, you just like, you know, really quickly trace the outline, trace inside, and you know, done. You know, you have your phone, and you can start drawing stuff inside. Yeah, so definitely think about things like this. So you built your first set of prototypes. Now comes the more important bit. Remember how I said this prototype is not just for the sake of building a prototype. It's to test your product. It's to show that you have some sort of traction. This is the important bit, right? So you've built your first set of prototypes. Now you need to test them out, right? So what exactly do? You go to your customers and you show them what you have, and then you have a set of questions that you want to ask them, right? So what exactly do you need to know when you're building this paper prototype? You need to ask, or you need to understand from your customers, are you solving your customer problems? And are you making it easy for them, right? So these are the two most important things that you will try to understand at this point, right? And later on, this is grayed out because you will focus on this later on. So some questions that you want to ask. Does my app, website, product do what you think do what you thought it does, right? Like, does it actually do what I told you it would do? Or does it do something completely different? Do you understand the flow of information? Do you understand how to get from one place to another? Is it easy to actually use? Is it easy to get to where you want to get to? Or are you having trouble getting there? There are some type of questions you shouldn't ask. Do you like this? Is one of them. Why should you ask a question like that? It's because this is kind of an open-ended question. Somebody could answer it in any way, and usually you won't get much useful information out of that. If they say, I don't like it, then you have to ask them more questions to figure out why they don't like it. If they say they like it, then you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'm done. And you just move on to the next step. It's usually not enough. And then, what do you want the product to do? At the end of the day, you are building this product, you're building it for your customer, but what you want to ask your customer is like, are you building what they need, rather than asking them, hey, what exactly do you want? Because they could answer that in any way. Like, they could say, hey, I want this product to give me free food, and you're like, no, well, you still need to pay for it. So these are like open-ended questions that will that may not get you anything useful out of, so it honestly just wastes everyone's time. Leading questions. So these are questions that will get your customer to answer in a certain way that may be kind of biased, or they may feel pressured to answer the question in a certain way. So something like, hey, you like my app, right? Like, your customer is going to say, no, I don't like it. They feel like they might hurt your feelings. Or something like, isn't this feature helping you get better at your job? Again, it's one of those questions that you're trying to pressure your customer into answering in a certain way. You might get the answer you want to hear, but you won't get the answer you need to hear. More importantly than simply, and asking these questions, sometimes you really want to observe them, as they're actually going through this process. You want to see, like, hey, are they getting confused? Are they, are they getting frustrated? You'll find hidden problems that you don't realize, even they don't realize sometimes, right? Watch their facial expressions, listen to how they talk, try to understand their feelings, try to imagine that you are them for a moment, right? It's that whole idea of empathy, which I'm sure you might have heard of, or you probably will hear of sometime during these 3 weeks. Okay, we are a bit over halfway through this program. You've been sitting for about an hour and a half now, or actually an hour or so. Nobody should sit for more than an hour. We're going to do a small little thing as well, just to kind of get that blood flowing again. So I didn't want to do this, but I think I'm going to do it anyway. So what I'm going to do is a wave. Okay, I've done this before. A couple of the people who've seen me here before are like, oh God, not again. But we'll do it anyway because none of you have done this before. So, so you've been to a stadium before, or you've been to a sports event. What they do is, people start at one end, they kind of raise their hands, and they go across and all the way to the other end. So we're gonna try doing that here, okay? Just to kind of get that blood flowing again as we go towards the end of this talk. Right. So, and I'm gonna take a video of this, just because I can and because I feel cool doing it. So, okay, here's what we're gonna do. Let's see. Let's start on this side, right? So you all over there. When I say go, you're gonna kind of just go like this and like cheer and go like whoa, and then we're gonna kind of go through this room. Okay, sounds good?
Shall we come back as well, or only to one from one side to other?
Let's come back. Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Why not? Cool. Okay. Ready? Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm back. Okay. All right. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you guys. Cool. Feeling a bit more energized? Cool. Okay, right, so I'll post that up on our Innovation Academy social media. Who owns the account over here?
One second.
I'll find whoever owns the account. I'll send this to you. Cool. Okay, so moving on really quickly to the second or the last third of the talk. Digital prototyping. So next week you'll have a proper session on digital prototyping, so I won't go over it too much. So you're actually having some people come from Adobe this year to give a talk on digital prototyping. So I'll just tell you exactly like what happens and how you move from your paper prototype to your digital prototype. So even in digital prototype you have those like low fidelity and you have high fidelity, just like you do in paper prototyping, right? So you start off over here and you move your way towards here. So you can kind of see these same layouts, like there's this add memories thing, you see add memories over here, record a memory down over here. So the idea is you go from those like lines and shapes to something with a bit more color. And it's for the same exact reason, because if you started off by showing this to your customer, they'd be like, oh, I don't like the rounded corners on the recording button. And it's like, okay, sure, but that's not what I want to ask you about right now. Like those are things you want to save towards the end. The first thing you want to ask them is the product you're building actually solving the problems they have, right? So that's why you save this stuff towards the end. But you can kind of see once you have those paper prototypes, it's really easy to make a digital version of that. So you can start off by just taking pictures of what you already have, right? So those paper prototypes, you take pictures, and you have to actually to submit those pictures to to the platform for this program anyway. So you already have those pictures, and now all you do is you put those pictures in your digital prototyping software and you trace over them. And it's because you've done paper prototyping, it's an easier process to move into digital. There are loads of different programs to help you do this, right? So there is, InVision, Keynote, Adobe XD, all these different programs. Some things that you want to consider while you're building, while you're trying to figure this out is what's the learning curve like? Is it an easy program to use? Is it a hard program to use? Will I have to spend a lot of effort, a lot of cost in understanding how to use this, which is going to waste valuable time in a short program? What devices does it work on? Whether there's high fidelity and low fidelity support, sharing functionality, can I share this to others? And the actual cost of purchasing the product. Some of these you have to buy, like Photoshop and things like that, you would have to buy. Adobe XD is cool because they offer a trial version or a free version, so it's actually free if you're just using it for 1 or 2 products, if you're sharing 1 or 2 products. So it's perfect for you all because it's a really powerful tool and it's essentially free, completely free. I personally like using Apple Keynote. Apple Keynote is the Apple version of PowerPoint. It was actually designed and prototyped in Apple Keynote itself. So kind of cool that they use their own product to build their product. I'm using Apple Keynote to do this presentation as well, actually. So it's easier to manipulate images, make simple layouts, and carry out transitions. as well, so you can kind of like make things move around and stuff. It's kind of cool. And then there's Adobe XD. XD stands for Experience Design. It's free for both Mac and PC. You know, you can easily create repetitive elements and placeholders, so things like, you know, you have a list. So imagine that food ordering app. You know, you want to display, you know, pictures of all the different food. You just imagine like you create one picture and then you would drag it and it'll create like, you know, a whole grid of pictures for you. And again, you'll see this next week. It's really cool. You can create those interactions and you can share those prototypes with your friends here, but also, you know, you'll get a shareable link and you can share it around the world. And so it's really awesome to be able to take that digital prototype and start sharing it with, you know, your friends and family and connections like all over the world, really quickly to get that feedback from everyone you possibly can. Super cool. Okay, so design hacks. We talked a bit about this. You know, so these are, I'm going to show you all a couple of tools that I use, you know, to build stuff, you know, like cool stuff quicker. So let's actually do that. So I have a couple of slides down here to show you some of these things, but I'll show some of them in person. So like the nounproject.com, one of my favorite places to get icons. So imagine you're building your digital prototype and, you know, you need an icon for a microphone or a home or something. You could just honestly just search over here. I don't have the Wi-Fi, so forget about, like, I'm not going to actually do anything over here. Didn't ask about the Wi-Fi password before coming. But yeah, so like you can find all these icons. I personally have, you know, given some of my icons here as well, so you might be able to search me up and find. I have like 1 or 2 icons in this library, and I've made. You can actually make money off of this. So in 4 years, I've made $7 from icons. So super rich. But yeah, obviously, like if you're actually into like building icons and stuff, and you start building like sets of icons and people buy them, you know, you can make a good amount of money from this as a side thing. Here's another one called Flat Icon. So the cool thing about Flat Icon is a lot of the icons, like, they have color. They're like a big 3D, even though the name is Flat Icon. It's actually not completely flat. As opposed to Noun Project, which generally makes like, you know, single color icons. So these icons are free to use as long as you are attributing the source. So you would have like a slide at the end of your presentation or somewhere like where it says like, hey, I got these icons from Noun Project or whatever. So if you do that, you can use these icons for free. Again, really cool if you have a negative bank account balance like I do. So this is called color.adobe.com. It's a great way to find a good color scheme. So basically, when you're trying to build a color scheme for your product, you need to understand like, hey, do I want something that is, you know, like warmer colors, or do I want something that's like, you know, kind of cooler colors, and, you know, I can move this over here and it'll be like, hey, so here are, you know, 5 colors that you can use in your product, right? So you have analogous, which means like all the colors are slightly similar. You have monochromatic, which means all your colors are exactly the same, like different shades of blue in this case. You have a triad, which is like, you know, all across the color wheel and so on. So this is a cool website. You should definitely check it out. But one of the problems with things like this is they give you too many options, too many choices. So here's another one called flatuicolors.com. If you open the first palette right over here, it gives you a total of 20 colors. 20 colors to choose from, and these 20 colors will make your product look beautiful. You would just choose, in this case, you choose like 3 of these colors. So you'd have a white and a black probably, and on top of that, you would be like, okay, I want 2 shades of like purple, and then maybe 1 shade of red, and that's all you use for your product. And if you click copy, It'll just copy that color code, and you can straight away paste it into your design product or into your actual code as well. If you all are Instagram users, I'm assuming you all are. There's this account on Instagram called Awesome Color, AWSM Color. Really, really cool. I just discovered this like 2 weeks ago or something, and I was like, I have to tell somebody about this. So now you all have to hear about it from me. But anyway, so they give you a set of like, here's like a simple post, right? So you open this and it's like, hey, make something with this, you know, cool. Oh yeah, forgot I'm not on the Wi-Fi. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, those are some cool places you can check out. Yeah. Let me go back to Keynote. Yeah. So again, Adobe Color, Flat UI Colors. CSS-matic is kind of cool if you're building something with CSS. Resize My Browser is another one of my favorites. Like if you're building, this is when you start to code. Like these three are when you're starting to code. CSS-matic, Resize My Browser. It allows you to, if you're building like something for your phone, but you're actually building it on a web browser, then you can be like, hey, let me click this, you know, like 480 by 320, which is, okay, so this is a really old slide. So like, you know, you see iPhone 4, Google Nexus 1, and all of these things, but obviously, you know, super old products. But basically, you can click on any one of these, and it'll resize your browser to fit. And so obviously now you have like newer products, and it'll show those as well. 960 grid system, also kind of cool. Yeah, so again, if you're building a website, it allows you to build those columns out really quickly as well. Some other resources, so again, take out your phone, take some pictures of these slides. Hope you can kind of see all of the text properly from your phones. But so these are cool places to get stuff to download just to use in your product. So like subtle patterns, you get some cool backgrounds there. Flat UI Colors, Awesome Color for color schemes. Pexels.com for images. So if you want like a nice, beautiful background image, then you can get those at Pexels.com for free. Non-project flat icon. And then here are some more as well if you feel like you want to pay for something even more cool. Learning resources, UX Magazine, SmashingMagazine.com. These are two of my favorite places to learn about the newest and latest trends in the UX world. Tutsplus.com is a great place to get tutorials. So Tuts stands for tutorials apparently. Great place to kind of learn how to use different design products. Dribbble.com with 3 Bs. This is the best place for inspiration for a designer. It's all the best designers, showcasing some of their newest work. It's super cool. And the reason it's like that is because you actually need to, you can't just post on it. You need to be invited by another designer who's already there. And even these other designers, they can't just add anyone onto the platform. They have to be very specific about who they choose. So it's only the best designers on Dribbble.com. You should also look at the Android UI guide and iOS human interface design guide as well if you're building products on mobile apps. Oh no, I'm supposed to skip through these slides. Yeah, let me skip through them real quick. Yeah, so last bit of my conversation for today. What if I'm not making an app or a website? Some of you are probably building physical stuff, you're building a piece of hardware, or you're you're building a service or something that doesn't require an app or a website. So a lot of times these talks are structured towards those things, but obviously the more we're getting into the future, the more all these tech things are becoming more physical and being a part of our like daily life rather than just on a phone or like on a laptop. So there's still many ways to prototype your product. One really interesting way is Wizard of Oz. So I had a startup prior to working for Amazon and Microsoft where I was building on technologies in autonomous cars, right? So how do you build a prototype of an autonomous car? How do you test that? You can't actually go out into the market with an actual autonomous car and be like, hey, let's just put this out on the road and see if it kills any pedestrians or not. It's not that simple, right? There's all these regulations and stuff attached to it. So and obviously, sometimes the technology just isn't there, or you don't want to have to build the entire AI in order to test your product, right? So that's where Wizard of Oz comes in. Have you guys watched Wizard of Oz? Or I feel like it's from like 80s kids would probably know about Wizard of Oz, but the fact is like the people who coined these terms are also from the 80s, so unfortunately now you have to listen to these things you probably never heard of. So it's a movie about this girl who gets stuck in wait, am I confusing two stories? Okay. Anyway, so I'm gonna spoil the Wizard of Oz for you because I'm assuming none of you are gonna watch it ever. Basically, what happens is there's this guy who's pretending to be like this big, scary godlike creature who has control over this whole city. But at the end of the day, he's like this tiny little person with I think he's got a camera pointed at him and it's like projecting on this big screen. So he's acting like this tiny person in a room, pretending to be somebody much bigger than he is. I think that's what happened. I watched it like 20 years ago. Anyway, so the idea is, sometimes you can have like a hidden person do things that your computer or like your AI system would have done, right? So in this case, you have like, let's say you're driving an autonomous car, but obviously you don't have an autonomous car in your disposal. So how do you do the Wizard of Oz for that? So you have like that hidden person, right? So in this case, there was this experiment done where they were trying to see how other people react to autonomous cars, but they don't have an autonomous car at their disposal, so they have this ghost driver who's sitting in the car, but you can't really see the person. And so everyone outside thinks it's an autonomous car, but it's actually not. So can anybody like spot the person in this autonomous car? Kind of. Some people can. You probably can because you've been staring at the screen for the past like 10 minutes or so as I'm talking. But here's another look at that same person. They're wearing essentially a chair, and their hands are sticking out at the bottom, and they've got this little like mask over their face that they can see through. So like but anybody else who's looking at the car from distance will be like, what is going on? They actually have this video you can find on YouTube where this person, sitting in this car goes to a McDonald's drive-through and freaks everybody out. So it's kind of fun to watch, but that's what they were testing. I was doing something similar, but here's an example of what I was doing. So I was trying to see how people react inside an autonomous car, in different sort of situations. So here's like my setup, right? So I have this is my prototype. I went to the digital prototype stage in this case. So here's an iPad, which I'm using as the screen that you see while sitting in a car. Here is a massive like TV screen which imitates what you see outside the car. And then here's a laptop which is connected to another place, and then here hidden there is a phone which is calling somebody else in another room who is acting as my Wizard of Oz person, who's acting as my AI. So like here's a close-up of the screen on the iPad, and here's like that video on the screen which looks like an autonomous car driving around. It was basically me in a driving simulator, and here's just showing you how I was driving around. So here's me and my test pilot. You can see she's wearing this like really funky looking glasses. What they were supposed to do was actually like control her vision so that she can only see in front of her and only see certain things. So in this case, we were actually testing what a person with low vision would feel like if they're driving if they're sitting in an autonomous car. Because right now, low vision people cannot actually drive, obviously, because they can't see enough. They're considered legally blind at some stage. So the idea of this would be to provide more mobility to those type of people. So she's sitting there, talking to the car, and you can't really hear what she's saying. But essentially, what happens is at this point where we start laughing, my Wizard of Oz guy, he was on the other end of that phone, and so he was actually typing stuff that the voice like AI system would reply, so you could actually hear him typing on the keyboard as the AI was trying to speak. So it was kind of an interesting experience. Obviously, you can try doing these things while you're here as well. But yeah, as you're going through this, ask us questions. If you don't know how to build that prototype, for your product, we are here to help. I'm going to be on the ground today, but so is like all of your other mentors on a daily basis. So ask for help. Repeat that validation. And now here are those questions we need to ask later on. Are you making it easy? Are you making it enjoyable? Like I mentioned, are you making it enjoyable kind of comes at the end when you start your digital prototyping stage. So that's essentially, I'm not going to quiz you guys today, so you're all lucky. Keep validating, keep iterating, and best of luck to all of you.
How long are you going to be here at the IIA?